Part 1, Chapter 10, Breach the Veil. The sun had gone behind the distant mountains 10 minutes ago, granting me an hour or two of fading light before dusk would envelop the land. Thankfully, my walk home after school had gone smoothly enough. I took my time, stirring all the events of the day. The inconsequential to pivotal, nothing was left unconsidered. I kicked stones along the cracked pavement, launching them ahead and skipping them over the dirt culvert. It had been a dry summer, so the road rivers were barely anything more than a trickling jammed up by leaves and occasional trash. I reached the field at the intersection of my road, and the final few hundred steps began. A long overdue breath reset my lungs, and I started to feel the discomfort in my heels. Waking up early today had sapped me of more energy than I expected, and now the only thing on my mind was food and a nap, even though I didn't want to turn the day in for night quite yet. The bluish-gray sky introduced humming pond frogs and buzzing insects. The deeper parts of the forest were slowly consumed by shadows, and that nagging feeling of someone watching me whispered in my ear. I wasn't afraid. I knew I was safe. If anything were to threaten my safety, I was pretty confident in my ability to either climb a tree or sprint to my house. My dad's face popped into my head. I wonder how he would react if he saw me running up the driveway with a stranger chasing me or an animal close by. Would he hold the door and wait, or would he meet me halfway and help? Maybe neither. Maybe he would see me in peril and just go back to whatever he was doing. There's really no way of knowing how a dangerous scenario would unfold. I knew I was thinking of this as a way to distract from approaching reality. The truth is, I'm coming home late without notifying him in any way. If he's home, he's going to be pissed. Hopefully, he'll listen to my reason and not just fly off the handle. Yeah, right. I scoffed. I reached the name and number and turned into my driveway. The car was there. Suddenly heavier, my feet dragged across the mixed dirt and sand of my driveway. I noticed the porch light was on. That could be a good thing. Maybe he's concerned and will just be happy I made it home safe. Chirping wildlife was drowned out by the steadily growing beat of my heart. It filled my ears, beating to escape as I anticipated his potential wrath. Then, a dramatic thought burst into my brain. Run away. I stopped, numb to everything surrounding me. I've been on this train of thought before, and every time it makes more sense to follow through. I could leave right now, race my way to Joey's house. Only a couple more miles, and I'd be resting on his couch downstairs like I did the first time. I never told him why I was there, but he knew something was very wrong. He didn't pry. He just comforted me and made me feel okay. His mom drove us to school the next morning and apparently had a conversation with my dad that made him not talk to me for a week. We never spoke of it. I couldn't help but wonder if he would even bother looking for me. If I was gone, I wouldn't bother him so much. I wouldn't cost him any more precious money, time, or parental obligation. A burden lifted. I chewed on the concept in silence, standing at the bottom step before the porch. Daylight dwindling and the chill of night at my ankles. I sighed, eyes heavy with unexpressed emotion and sleeplessness. The creak of the screen door destined me to be home tonight, and the soft thud of each approaching footstep further cemented this submission. One more consideration. My steps vibrated the old wood of the porch, and the screen door whined as it opened inward. The front door flew open without warning and sparked life in me. Before I could return to my conscious self, his voice blasted my face while the inside light stole the focus from my eyes. "Where the hell have you been?" My entire body shook as I mumbled, blood pumping and voice trembling. "I stayed after school with my friend, but there were no late buses today, so I had to walk," I said nervously. He gripped the body of the door tightly, fully exposed arm taut and vascular. The light behind him gave an otherworldly edge to his shape, making him feel larger and more intimidating. "What friend? Is it that fucking boy?" No, it's nothing like that, I pleaded, quickly adding. I should have called you, I know, but you never answer the phone, so...
I'm not listening to your lying bullshit. I swear to God, Kimberly, if you were out fucking around, would you stop and listen to me?
His calloused hand shot forward and clutched a bundle of my short hair, dragging me into the house.
Ow! Dad, let go!
I yelled, and the door slammed shut behind us. My feet tripped and bumped across the floor, hands trying to get under his grip and pry it away. He finally released me, and I flopped onto the couch, scalp throbbing and eyes watering. My bag had barely clung on by the crook in my elbow, so I let it slide onto the floor, now just watching him. I sniffled, arms loosely folded around my stomach. He paced around for a moment, glancing toward me occasionally with this bizarre look of contemplation. This was certainly drunk behavior, but it was also something more. Something new. Despite my entire body burning, defusal was the best approach. I retracted my anger and expressed in a calm voice. Did you start your medication again? Alcohol and those pills don't mix, you know that. He stopped pacing and glared at me. One eye half closed, the other was wide and full of fury. No response. My eyes dilated, growing wider. Dad, I promise you I wasn't out doing anything I shouldn't. I was at school with a friend who's a girl, just talking and unwinding. You can call the school in the morning and they'll tell you exactly where I was.
Yeah, I'll fucking call them in the morning, he said in this immature, whiny tone, sarcastic and demeaning. Then he swung his hand at nothing by his side, nearly slapping the dividing wall that held the house phone by the kitchen. The way he moved wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. Twitchy, uncoordinated. He sucked in air like he was going to yell, but wheezed out a struggled string of words. I won't call because you're a liar. A no-good piece of shit liar who's fucking with my head. He jammed his middle finger into his temples. I leaned back a little. This was absolutely unlike him. Unlike the person he promised he had changed from. Dad, No!
His voice boomed.
For all I know, you were fucking that boy behind the school just to piss me off,
he shouted, on the brink of being emotional. That spiked a fresh fire in my chest, and my mouth hung open in disbelief.
You're not serious?
I matched his tone. He stepped closer, but his lack of balance caused him to bump into the end table.
I know what he thinks about. I'd bury his punk ass in the backyard before he lays his hands on you.
You've known Joey since we were practically babies. You know he isn't like that. What the fuck is wrong with you? He immediately raised a clenched fist.
You watch your fucking mouth.
My hands mirrored his, but I let it go. I've been here many times before. I had to let his words bounce off and just nod along with the occasional, yes, sir. But it wasn't so easy this time. This writhing pressure under my skin. I just wanted to break his nose. I exhaled a hot breath and looked to the floor. Why don't you just lie down and we can talk about this later? You look exhausted. He grunted angrily and moved to the kitchen. It went quiet. Looking around the room, I huffed louder than I meant to, debating on running out the door. There's no way he could catch me in his condition. I doubt he'd even be able to start his car. The darker it is, the harder it'd be for him to find me, and I know exactly where to run and hide. Before I could solidify the idea, he re-entered the room and advanced toward me at a rapid pace. I didn't even get to fully turn my head before the back of his hand was whipped across my face. Stunned, ears ringing from the impact, and brain resettling, my hand rose up and tenderly touched my cheek. Looking at him, wide-eyed with tears burning, my lips quivered. You, I whimpered. He became distant all at once. His face showed surprise and fear, but his body continued the onslaught.
Another slap hit the same spot, and I fumbled into the back of the couch, shrieking in pain. The third came, closer to a fist than a slap, but this time I reacted enough to bring my arm into his path, absorbing the blow in my right forearm.
Ah!
I cried in pain, falling backward while he lurched forward.
Stop! What are you doing?
It's happening again.
Shut the fuck up!
He threatened, aiming a deadly pointer finger at me with red in his eyes and the shadow of the lamp digging dark trenches across his face. A zap in my skull introduced a warbling vignette to my vision. Cold, numbing pain flickered in my brain, and the blood started to pool under my cheek skin. Frightened, mind swarming with stimulus, I slid to the opposite end of the couch until my shoulders were halted by the arm. Words were useless. He approached furiously, mumbling broken words and snarling like a beast. He was leaning over the opposite end, one knee raised to give him an angle and his arms outstretched to grip my shoulders. He used the end table to climb closer to me, but it slipped across the greasy carpet and settled halfway between the living room and the kitchen. He eventually got on top of me and pressed me into the cushion, teeth flared.
Fucking lie to me, crazy bitch! I've done everything for you, but that's never been enough. Ungrateful shit. If it were up to me, I'd trade you for your mother in a heartbeat!
He bellowed in a voice that didn't even sound like him. Shell-shocked, I glared with horror in my eyes.
Shut up. You don't... I give anything for just 5 minutes again with her, he hissed.
A hot metal lump formed in my throat, and all the feeling escaped my body. I whimpered. The chatter of my teeth and the ache in my arm and face distracted every word. He had me pinned, and I screamed.
So would I! I'd trade you for 10 seconds with Mom. I'd trade us both for her to have a second chance, so fuck you!
An open palm slap to the side of my head was his response. From a full-grown man, a slap like that might as well be a full punch, and now I'm 3 hard hits in. With that, I was knocked free from his grip and fumbled off the couch to my knees. Everything was spinning, and the few words I protested with echoed back at me, giggling, unsympathetic. He was trying to regain himself, lifting off the couch and standing again with a strange wobble. He was still muttering. I couldn't understand a word of it. Dazed and desperate, my legs finally agreed with my brain and attempted to make a run for the door. 2 quick, assuring breaths prepped me for the dash. I sprang up as quickly as I could and slammed into his chest, breaking away from the tight encounter. My uncoordinated escape was tragically sabotaged by my backpack strap catching my foot. I fell with my full weight onto the corner of the end table that was pushed aside, smashing my chin and slicing it open on the chipped wood corner. I hit the ground, stunned, vision white and slowly returning while I cut my lower jaw. The fuzzy, warm numbness instantly sweltered my chin, and hot blood pooled in my clinging palm. Vulnerable and dazed, I rolled onto my back and prepared to defend myself. I saw his vague shape close to the counter, braced against it and holding his head. A whimpering cackle mixed with a pained crying. He huffed and spat a glob of mucus to the floor, growling through flared teeth.
Don't leave me, Kimberly. He can't.
He whipped his head side to side and smacked it twice. He then hobbled toward me and reached for my shirt. I reacted sharply and threw my foot into his chest and shouted, "Get away from me!" He flopped back, tripping over his own feet and clattering into the divider wall. He smashed his head right beside the phone, knocking it off the hook and slumping to the floor. This gave me another chance to escape, so I rolled onto my hands and knees, fighting the daze and pain and sprinting haphazardly for the front door. I barely made it out without slamming into the doorframe. As soon as the cold evening air splashed my skin, I shouldered the screen door and launched right off the top step. Airborne for half a second, my foot thankfully aligned with the dirt,
and I hit it like a pole vault, sending a shock up my ankle as I slowed my descent, but still face-planted. A cloud of dust surrounded me as I started coughing, the cut on my face now full of small rocks and sand. My fingernails collected debris as I clambered to my feet and spat. It was darker now, but I continued my escape around the back of the house, running blindly across the dark grass and into the short path that cut through the trees. I could hear him calling. "Kimberly!" His voice swelled with raw anger. Then, almost like a switch of personality, receded to potent sadness and regret. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean it." Those words echoed, swallowed by the unforgiving night. Lead tears and blood raced down my face and dripped from my chin, leaving a trail of fleeting life and emotion in my wake as I stumbled across the forest floor. My aching feet carried me in a desperate, off-balance sprint to a safe place away from him. But I only made it so far until my legs finally gave out and my breath was stripped away. But I managed to keep my composure enough to drop to all fours. I panted furiously, with stifled yelps of pain spliced between. The wet leaves dug into the dirt under my weight, and the damp ground soaked into the fabric of my jeans. A quick glance down this old, carved pathway back to where I came from revealed a portion of my house visible through the silhouetted trees. I could see a large chunk of my bedroom window poking through the black foliage. An ominous, sickly feeling infected me. Sobbing turned to unfiltered anger, and my knuckles turned white from the pressure of a vengeful fist. I punched the ground once, then twice. The third time was softer, and instead twisted into the cold dirt like a screw. "Why?" I sputtered, unable to control my tears. "Fucking why?" I shrieked, and the break in my voice transitioned to hurtful, belting cries. Alone, crying like a baby. I hate him. I hate myself. I hate this life. I allowed my tears to deplete as the sting in my face ejected blood like a broken spigot. Surrounded by bleak, infinite night, exposed and vulnerable. Yet I wasn't afraid. I didn't feel the prowling eyes of sunless creatures, nor did my overactive imagination create some means to elevate my heart. The adrenaline had peaked. My mind was in pieces, and my body was oh so confused. Chilled air quickly irritated every inch of my skin, settling deeper into the open wound and pestering the bleeding for seconds. Both my hands were stained red, and the longer I stared at my own blood, the more furious I became again. Macabre images of my father dead started to flood my brain. His blood on my hands, his tears of regret leaving me satisfied. This vision bubbled up from a deep pit in my belly. It came with a lullaby I hummed along to. My fingers curled into fists, and the red juice squelched, drooling down my wrists as I raised both fists up towards the sky. Nauseating gore splattered my imagination, flashes of his face crushed, snapshots of his broken bone protruding from his skin, the sound of him screaming and begging for me to stop. It feels so real, so close, within reach, if only. Piece of shit, I grumbled, mouth slacked and eyes sharp with hate. My arms lowered onto my folded knees and unclenched, broken, a little porcelain doll cast down to the concrete. That's all I am. I took a deep, stabilizing breath into my nose and released it from my mouth. This attempt to calm down had failed. Every finger twitched, and my bones throbbed with an unfiltered desire to kill him
or myself. That antiquated fascination reared again. This time, there was plenty of coal to fuel the fire. It was then that I heard a distant sputtering, the familiar sound of his car attempting to start. The engine roared in the desolate night, and the tires competed with a scream of their own as he hastily drove away. Silence befell me as I held my breath, waiting to hear him crash into a tree. Then again, part of me wants him to make it back safely, so I can get back at him myself. I spit again, and used the back of my hand to wipe more blood from my chin. This is the last time. My nose crinkled as the horrifying images danced. Slowly, I decompressed, returning to someone I would recognize in the mirror. Acute awareness of exactly where I was finally settled into my skin, and the goosebumps aroused by mysterious shadows raised my head to observe. The moon was bright, guiding. It hardly reached me, but a gentle sliver of milky white touched my hands and illuminated the red. I sat in silence for a while longer, listening to the world as it remained oblivious to me and my troubles. Minuscule, unimportant. All that rage was fleeting now. Every vengeful word I swore on, the threats against his life, and my willingness to murder him in his sleep were drifting out of reach. In reality, I was lightheaded and hungry. The pain in my face kept me cognizant, but the diminishing adrenaline left me sluggish. I had no way of knowing how long I'd been here, but I'd guess half an hour at the least. I got to my feet and wearily retraced my steps. This new trauma paired well with the others I coddled. It shared many similarities, but had its own unique color and flavor. My skull buzzed and my face felt stiff and tacky. Trails of red were carved down my neck and over my collarbone, and my fingertips dripped as they swayed at my sides. I rounded the corner of my house and hoisted myself up the steps. Once I re-entered the living room, I stopped to examine the small chaos. I felt like a ghost disconnected from my flesh, staring on with remorse for a past that cannot be changed. I pushed on, ascending the staircase, and turned left to my bathroom. There she is, the girl I knew. Bloodshot eyes, damaged, exhausted, and so sick of this game. The headache from every slap rattled my skull. Ringing in my left ear fought for dominance over the buzz in my right. My head tilted, and I pulled some hair out of the way to see a discolored bruise forming just in front of my ear. I whined as I poked it and blew hot air through my lips. I can hide that easily enough behind my hair. I turned the faucet on and used a nearby washcloth to wipe the blood from my hands and neck before moving to the gash. Surreal, automated movements, like a puppet. My rigid motions were forgotten as soon as performed. Once that was done, I opened the medicine cabinet behind the mirror and removed a box of Band-Aids. My attempt to conceal the wound failed, as the adhesive had no comfortable place to grip properly. Instead, I opted for a gauze square and taped it messily to my skin. At this point, it had stopped bleeding so fiercely, but the idea that I may need stitches made me a bit queasy. I am no stranger to pain, but there's something about someone pushing a needle and string through my skin that makes me shudder. Returning to my room, I dragged myself over to my bed and sat on the edge, waiting for this nightmare to break the illusion and stir me back to life. A normal day. My knees pulled to my chest and my arms tightly wrapped around them. A safety blanket. The only hug I get. I lost it again. I tried to fight the emotions, using my inner anger to snuff out the sadness, but it didn't work. In the end, my tears prove that I'm just a coward. I'm powerless. Why am I so weak? The walls seemed to close in on me, and all color had drained away. A shadow at my core slashed, knotted, and bit at the cage I kept so close. Suddenly, a strange, visceral feeling surged in my gut. Painful, searing like hot oil. I let my feet touch the floor off the side of the bed, and I placed my hand on my stomach with a dry gasp. My mouth hung open, saliva pooling in front of my teeth as I tried to take in air. I started blinking rapidly as my vision began to defocus. What is... I shot up and cast my stare around the room, completely silencing my breaths and forcing all mental energy into looking and listening. Alarms rang in my ears, paranoia grew legs and dashed back and forth in my brain. The more I focused, the louder some distant, artificial noise grew. A strained whisper stabbed my eardrums like frozen, dull needles.
He's coming. Don't listen to...
My hands fell to my side and clutched the sheets. My breathing slowly returned, but only escaped as partial huffs. "Who's talking?" I questioned the walls. The voice responded. This time it was booming, screaming in absolute agony.
"Oh, a friend!"
Fear found its place in my heart, and I scuttled up to the headboard. "Friend?" I questioned. In a blink, I went from sitting on my bed to standing outside my house in the middle of the driveway. Flooded by this new location, I scanned the boundary of a perceived forest, but nothing seemed solid. Nothing stayed the same for more than a few seconds, yet never changed at all. The trees remained absolutely still for 1 second, but changed to decayed husks in my peripheral. The only constant was my barren, unlit house. I accepted it as the decayed and broken monument that it was, as though it had always been this. A girl was standing before me, but never existed until I noticed her. She was masked in shadows, but key features were sewn on the surface of my brain. Thin, tight skin and long, faded red hair. A deeper red was visible to me, one that stained the left side of her face and head. Blood. I couldn't see her whole face, only bits and pieces flashed in and out of this reality. I spoke. "How are you speaking to me? Is this real?" She replied, tired and sunken. "Real. I can see you, just out of reach. A voice led me to you. There is a peace here with me, with us. It's very warm. What voice? What peace?" I questioned, exhaustion quickly piling on. "What you have, it may not be enough to stop her, if you survive." "Her? Who the hell are you talking about?" The demon. Listen.
Listen!
She screamed at me, but her face froze in a state of lifeless despair. "He will try to steal you, use you. It's a trick. It's a lie." A pause. My head pounded violently, and I couldn't find the words needed to respond. "If fate would have it, she is false. Do not fear her shape," she whispered. "What are you talking about? Tell me who you are!" I half shouted. My voice bounced impossibly all around me. "Lucy." As she said her name, I felt a burning sensation begin to grow behind my eyes. Unexpectedly, her previously frozen body collapsed to the ground, animated like a movie missing random frame intervals. Her arms pulled her legs close to her chest, just as I had been on my bed. Her body froze again, and she began to sob.
He's coming. He's coming.
She cried. Her body slowly began to fade away, splintering and turning to black dust before me. Without warning, I was struck by a loud ringing. A deep breath was shoved down my throat, and I awoke, sitting up with great force. My hair was disheveled, and my bangs were scattered, sticking to my forehead in odd clumps. I looked around. The room seemed darker than usual, eerily so. How long has it been? When did I fall asleep? Panting heavily, I wiped the sweat from my brow. Looking down, I realized the shirt I slept in was soaked through with sweat and my body was blazing hot. I sat there, lost in random mental twitches. My eyes fell to my arms. The bruise was bold and deep purple. My nose crinkled with a grim expression. I directed my attention to the silent alarm clock, recalling the imitating ring that broke me from the nightmare. 3:32 a.m., I read out loud. Everything was so still, so peaceful. I was fooled into thinking it would stay that way. Having been barely lucid for a little under a minute, that pain in my stomach returned. As soon as it did, my heart began to race and worry clouded my mind. Not again, I thought. Every shadow and dark corner began to pulse and sway as if the darkness itself was coming alive. I reached for my lamp to pull the string, but no light came. When my gaze returned to the middle of my room, I noticed something was missing. The pale moonlight that usually leaked in from my window was nowhere to be seen. It became instantly clear that it wasn't gone, but something was blocking its rays. In the corner of my eye, without looking directly at it, I could see that same shadow figure, standing in front of my window, facing the glass. A lump formed in my throat, and my body began to tremble. Then, I remembered the voice in my dream. Hide. But if I move, what will happen? If I don't do anything at all, what will happen? Instincts overpowered rational thought, and my body came to the decision to move, but I had no destination. Bathing in a pool of sweat and fear, I quietly rolled off my bed and casually reached for the door handle, hoping against hope that if that shadow man was real in any way, it wouldn't follow me downstairs. Swallowing hard, a fuzzy static rose in my skull, slowing my movement. Before I could think about my next move, the room exploded with a deafening white noise. My teeth clamped, throat closed and eyes wide. My brain shook so intensely it felt like it would soon shatter like cheap glass. In merely 5 seconds of endurance, I started to groan in agony. My hands shot to my ears in a desperate attempt to quiet the barrage, but it had no effect. The noise wasn't in the room, or even in my head. It resonated from within me, as though my soul itself was being shaken by some godly force. Choking on the groan, I collapsed to the floor, landing on my left shoulder and rocking sharply, knees curling up to my chest, then shooting straight as I rolled onto my back. A screaming belt of pain erupted from my chest as the temperature of my skin skyrocketed. Squirming and jittering, I whimpered whatever noise I could. Each breath exhaled shortened the next intake. I was suffocating. I opened my eyes to try to figure out where I was exactly, but my vision was solid white. I could feel my vocal cords straining to let out my voice, but I heard nothing over the white noise. I rolled over and smacked my forehead against the floor once to try to reset. "What's going on?" I asked in my head.
What is all this?
Out of absolutely nowhere, everything stopped. Flat on my stomach, no pain and no pressure. I paused, struck by confusion. My lungs filled with air again, but I held it in, waiting for something else to happen. My breaths flowed regularly, and I carefully stood up, turning to face the window. I saw nothing but the soothing moonlight on the floor. My hands continued to shake violently. I wasn't safe here. I had to escape. I quickly turned myself back to the door, but locked eyes with a physical person. Before my brain could even process what was in front of me, it spoke.
Do not fear me, Kimberly. I have no desire to harm you.
His voice was cynical and confident, almost cheery but venomous. The man was tall, so much so that he was leaning forward and slumping his neck to beat my eyes. But once he resumed a natural, albeit still hunched posture, he towered above me. I was only average height for a middle school girl. To see his face, now, I had to crane my neck and lean back slightly. I choked on my own breath, fighting to speak with all my might until the words were forced out of me.
What do you want?
I shook. It was clear to me that this was the shadow person I have seen recently, now fully exposed as an older man nearly as pale as a ghost and thin as bone. His hair was gray and receding, and all the skin on his face was weighted, causing more wrinkles than anyone could count. A large nose and thin lips only added to his disproportionate appearance. He wore a very long, dark brown trench coat that was unbuttoned to reveal a black suit and tie. His hands remained in his pockets, and he just had this intent, somewhat crooked smile on his face the whole time. Apart from everything else, there was one detail that stood out to me the most.
Your eyes.
The yellow glow of his irises almost beckoned me to come closer, giving off a feeling of safety and closure, but at the same time instilling fear and distrust. The figure continued.
I'm here to grant you the peace and vengeance you so greatly desire. The blood-stained aggression that fills your heart can be satisfied.
Fear overrode all other systems, but my mouth still spat a hollow threat.
I don't know what you're talking about. You need to leave.
He laughed in a dry, amused way.
And what would you do if I refused to leave?
I gulped, fully aware I had no retort. He rolled his neck, both narrow eyes digging through my core.
I know what you've been facing. The conflict in your heart. I've helped many troubled teens like yourself in the past.
He removed one hand from his pocket, and I took a fearful step back. He then adjusted the tie beneath his coat and returned his hand to the pocket.
I'm here to offer you a deal.
A deal? What does that mean?
I asked timidly. He licked his lips quickly, routinely. The room got hot in an instant, and my legs started to feel heavy again. Without warning, my knees buckled and I fell to one knee. My breath once again eluded me.
You're doing this.
Your human body is weak. You cannot even bear to be in my presence unless I restrain myself. But that can change. You can be strong. Strong like me.
My head felt like 1,000 dull pencils drilled relentlessly, a maddening sensation. Then a flash of that girl's decrepit face appeared beneath my eyelids. Her voice was distant and echoing, barely a memory. I kept her warning in my head as I asked the next question.
What's the catch?
I'll give you power if you give me your soul,
he said casually with a cynical smirk.
My soul? Like my actual, real-life soul?
He then took his right hand out of his pocket again and offered it to me. His palm was flat. There were no folds on the skin that any human would have, and no fingerprints. His fingers were long and thin, the knuckles clearly defined. The tips of his fingers came to an acute angle, where his nails had yellowed and grown past the ends. Moldy crud was smudged across his skin and nails, completing the outlook of filth and decrepitude. Staring at his hand, I fell into a stationary void of memories. The actions of my dad today, a month ago, a year ago, everything he'd ever done to me was compressed into a single sphere of hatred and despondency. Another collection of thoughts flashed into my brain. Thoughts of Stacy and all the times she bullied me. made me feel inadequate and less than human. Every single one of those memories coagulated into its own sphere and took its place beside my dad's. Then, every random student, teacher, and stranger who wronged me came together as their own collection, burdening me with a self-loathing and destructive rage. These sensations, regret, and anger worked together to overwhelm me. I couldn't stop it. Every fold of my brain and natural electric impulse perfectly aligned to display all of my past turmoil. I blinked a few times, and my mind became a bit clearer, but total control remained out of reach. His hand hovered before me, waiting.
All you need to do to obtain power is take my hand. Simple.
In my mind, I could plainly see myself taking his hand, almost magnetized, over and over 100 times, 1,000 times, forever. Some semblance of goodwill hammered at the back of my brain. Joey, Tansu, all my teachers, the faint memory of my mom, the little glass unicorn. These conflicting energies spiraled in my mind, causing a violent storm that zapped and cut without mercy. He spoke again.
I understand your pain, your burden, all that anger and no strength to carry it out. The way you get pushed aside, made to feel a fool and treated like dirt. You can put an end to it. With the power I offer, no one can harm you ever again. They'll have no choice but to respect you.
I heard him plain as day, but was distracted by this gut feeling and Lucy's warning. I didn't notice until now, but the pain he caused me, the shortness of breath and disarray, had been lifted. At this understanding, I straightened my stiff back and stood tall once more. An assurance was established, and the fear I felt had nearly dissipated. He raised an eyebrow.
You can stand? My, how unexpected. Your willpower is strong, as I thought. I see greatness in you, young Kimberly.
He praised while uncertainty painted his face. Don't call me Kimberly. It's Kim, I said boldly, forcing that pit inside deeper. How am I supposed to trust anything you say? I don't know who or what you are, and as far as I can tell, you're just some weird ghost thing that's been tormenting me forever. This is all a trick, or a really fucked up dream. His expression then changed from impressed to slightly annoyed.
How hypocritical of you to damn your father for calling you a liar and mistreating you for his misconception. Yet, here you are, turning his words against me. What I offer is true and genuine. Power. How can I make you understand?
I didn't respond. Given my history with an overactive imagination and some really, really vivid dreams, I didn't know what was real or in my head. One thing I know for certain, this old man was anything but what he displayed on the outside. If he's real, then he's much more than some ghost or shadow figure. Lucy's words echoed, one in particular. Demon. My eyes widened slightly at the thought. Impatient, he cleared his throat.
How about some honesty from me? He smiled. That crushing pressure you endured moments ago, that was me trying to take your soul.
Instantly petrified, my face went pale. You... what?
Yes, well, it seems prior circumstances led an old accord to run dry, as I feared, which is why I'm making you this offer instead.
My fist clenched. Eyes darted behind him to my door. The urge to run washed over me again. Why are you so bent on giving me power? What am I, special or something? He grinned creepily and drew in a short breath.
Kim, I seek out adolescents such as yourself Desperate, hungry, sad things. I make dreams come true for a price. You'll never miss it. The soul isn't what you think. It's merely energy, not you.
His luring exposition sounded phony to me, recited and hollow. Then again, I have no idea what he even is, what my soul actually is. He noted my pause. The muscle manipulation on my face showed I was thinking. Tempting as it may be, I can't ignore my instinct. My hand fell to my side. Clarity. Even if this is just a dream or fucked up trauma hallucination, it doesn't make much sense.
No, I won't make the deal.
I could hear cracking coming from his bones in every motion he made as he slowly withdrew his hand, relaxing it by his side.
Very well, Kimberly. I must say, I'm a bit let down.
I sighed, the coil in my gut tensing. Silent, pondering, I averted my eyes and felt his crawl all over me.
Steady yourself, child.
With that, his eyes flared brighter than before, and he snapped his fingers and disappeared.